Terrence Coleman adjusted his rearview mirror for the third time as the yellow school bus rolled down the cracked streets of Winford Heights, just outside Atlanta. At 64, Terrence had already lived several lives: Vietnam vet, warehouse supervisor, occasional blues guitarist at the neighborhood bar, but it was driving bus Route 17 for Brookdale Middle School that had become his quiet purpose for the past 5 years. It gave his days rhythm, predictability, a reason to wake up and move forward. The late afternoon sun filtered through the grimy bus windows in golden streaks, casting long shadows over the vinyl seats as he tapped the steering wheel lightly in time with the song playing in his head, Something Slow and Scratchy by Bobby Womack. It was Wednesday, which meant chicken sandwiches in the cafeteria and tired teachers waving as the kids piled on. The bus was its usual cacophony of sneakers, laughter, slamming backpacks, and endless talk video games, social media gossip, and who got kicked out of gym for not changing clothes. Terrence smiled faintly. He never interrupted. He just listened. But today, like the last few days, his smile faded as his eyes shifted to the third row on the right. She was there again, hunched small against the window, arms tucked into her lap, denim jacket zipped despite the heat. Her name, he'd learned from the attendance roster, was Jada Monroe. 6th grade, new to the area, and utterly silent. Not the sulky kind of silence some middle schoolers cultivated like a badge, but a frightened, hollow sort of quiet that wrapped around her like a second skin. Terrence had noticed it a week ago, the tears she never wiped, the way she flinched at loud voices, the bruises she didn't explain. He hadn't said anything yet. Not to the principal, not to the other drivers at the yard. He'd just watched, waited, measured the difference between worry and suspicion. Today, though, something changed. As the bus turned onto Hickory Road, he caught a glimpse of her doing something strange. She bent sharply forward, disappearing beneath her seat for several seconds. Her shoulders shook slightly. Then she sat back up, too fast, brushing her sleeve across her face with a practiced, shaky motion. Terrence's gut, the same one that had saved him more than once in a jungle half a world away, clenched hard. When the bus finally reached the last cluster of apartment buildings on Carson Street, Jada's stop, Terrence pulled to a smooth halt in front of the faded brick facade of Building 9. "Here we are, young lady," he said softly, as he always did. She rose slowly, clutching her purple backpack to her chest like armor. Her sneakers scuffed against the bus floor as she descended the steps, never looking up. She didn't say goodbye. She never did. Just a faint wave without eye contact. As she walked toward the door of her building, Terrence watched her disappear behind the peeling blue paint and dead plants. Something inside him refused to let go. The bus was now empty, still running, quiet. The seat where she had sat felt like it hummed with something unspoken. He stood slowly, joints aching, and made his way down the aisle. Row 3, right side. He knelt, lowering himself carefully, bracing his hand on the backrest, and peered beneath the seat. He expected maybe a forgotten water bottle, a stray pencil. Instead, he found a small plastic lunchbox, the kind sold at dollar stores. Its faded surface covered in old cartoon stickers peeling at the corners. It was wedged tightly against the floor vent, tucked away as though hidden. Curious, he pulled it out. It felt heavier than it should have. His fingers hesitated at the latch. Then he opened it. What he saw made the air in his chest stall. Inside were things no child should ever have to carry. A half-used bottle of ibuprofen, a flip phone with a shattered screen, and a wrinkled note written in jagged, hurried handwriting. "If you say anything, They'll take you away from your mama forever." Terrence froze. For a long moment, he simply sat there, the lunchbox open in his lap, the bus engine murmuring behind him. Then he carefully closed the lid and stood up. His hands trembled slightly, not with age, but with the cold realization that something wasn't just wrong. It was urgent. He walked back to the front of the bus, sat in the driver's seat, and reached for the glove box. His phone was tucked inside. He stared at it for several seconds, weighing options, calculating consequences. Calling the school would start a chain of bureaucracy. Forms, delays, maybe even cover-ups. He'd seen it before. He needed something faster, firmer. He scrolled to the contact labeled Ray D and hit call. It rang twice. "Yeah, T." The voice on the other end was familiar, low, and steady. Officer Raymond Delaney, his neighbor, his chess rival, his fishing buddy for nearly 20 years. "Ray," Terrence said, voice low, "I need you to come to the corner of Carson and Carson. I found something. On my bus. It's about a girl. She's in trouble." There was a beat of silence, then Ray replied, "Don't move. 5 minutes." True to his word, the patrol car pulled up fast and quiet. No sirens. Ray stepped out, tall, broad, with a badge clipped neatly to his chest and eyes that missed nothing. Terrence handed him the lunchbox without a word. Ray read the note. His jaw flexed. "You sure this was hers?" "She sat there," Terrence said. "Same row every day." Ray nodded. "What unit?" 9C. Ray didn't hesitate. He radioed for backup, then moved up the sidewalk with the calm, coiled energy of a man who had been down this road before. Within minutes, 2 more cruisers arrived. Officers moved quickly, professionally. They knocked, waited, then used the key from the complex manager. Terrence watched from the bus. When the door finally opened, Jada appeared, barefoot, holding a ragged teddy bear. Her face was streaked with tears. Behind her stumbled a woman early 30s, hollow-eyed, half-drunk, yelling curses at everyone and no one. Ray knelt beside Jada, speaking softly. The woman, her mother, Terrence guessed, was handcuffed and led away. The child flinched at the noise, at the flash of lights, at the sound of her own name. Terrence sat gripping the wheel, unable to move, as the gravity of it sank in. This little girl had been hiding in plain sight, and he'd nearly missed it. When Ray returned to the bus, his face was hard. "She's safe," he said. "For now. But it's bad, T. Really bad." Terrence nodded, slow and heavy. "I want to go with her. Just for tonight. So she's not alone." Ray studied him for a moment. Then he said, "Follow us." The police station on Glenhaven Street was lit in sterile overhead fluorescence, casting every corner in sharp, colorless contrast. It smelled like overbrewed coffee and floor polish, the scent of bureaucracy and broken things trying to be fixed. Terrence Coleman sat stiffly in a vinyl chair beside the family services intake room, his ball cap resting in his lap, both hands folded tight. Across from him, Jada Monroe curled into one corner of the waiting room couch, her blanket pulled up past her chin. A county-issued thing that smelled faintly of starch and antiseptic. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't speaking either. She just stared at the floor with a stillness that didn't belong on any 12-year-old's face. She looked like she was waiting to be told how much worse it was going to get. An hour earlier, Terrence had stood silent as Raymond Delaney coordinated the initial report, logged the evidence from the lunchbox, and filed the temporary removal order with Child Protective Services. The woman in charge, Darlene Shepard, a veteran caseworker with creases under her eyes that said she had seen too many of these moments, had spoken with practiced gentleness. Jada didn't respond to her questions, just held on to her teddy bear like a life raft and nodded once when asked if she wanted something to drink. She didn't touch the juice box. Darlene had tried to send Terrence home. He wasn't family, after all. Not legally, not by blood. But when Jada's eyes followed him as he turned toward the door, when she opened her mouth just slightly in protest, it was Darlene who changed her mind. "You can stay," she'd said quietly, "just until a foster liaison arrives." Now it was past 9, and no liaison had come. The emergency foster system in DeKalb County was overwhelmed, underfunded, and stretched thin by an influx of cases. The same story, over and over. Terrence had heard it before. He'd just never been part of it. A vending machine in the corner rattled suddenly, causing Jada to flinch. Terrence rose, slowly, careful not to move too fast. "You want a snack, sweetheart?" he asked softly. She shook her head. Her hands stayed tucked under the blanket, her body barely visible beneath its folds. He hesitated, then pulled a pack of trail mix and a bottle of water from the machine and placed them beside her gently, not saying another word. When he sat back down, he realized how much his knees hurt. It wasn't just age, it was weight. The weight of sitting still when everything inside wanted to act. Another hour passed. The station grew quieter. Officers rotated out. Desks darkened. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome for nerves. At 10:37 p.m., Jada's voice broke the silence for the first time. "You're not my grandpa," she said quietly, her eyes still fixed on the floor. "No," Terrence replied, "I'm not." A pause. "But I can't sit here anyway, if that helps." She didn't reply, but she didn't tell him to leave. Around midnight, a tall woman with a clipboard arrived, breathless, glasses fogged from the drizzle outside. She introduced herself as Miss Gloria King, an emergency foster coordinator and part-time placement parent. "Sorry for the wait," she said, adjusting her scarf. "It's been a hard week." She knelt beside Jada, her voice warm. "Hi, honey. My name is Miss Gloria. We're going to go somewhere safe now, okay? You'll have a warm bed, your own room, and no one will bother you there." Jada blinked. She said nothing, just shifted slightly, clutching her beer tighter. Terrence stood. "May I walk her out?" Gloria looked up. "Your family?" "No," he said, "just here." After a brief pause, she nodded. "All right," and the walk to the parking lot was slow. Gloria carried Jada's backpack, light as air. Terrence walked beside them, umbrella held high. When they reached the car, Gloria opened the back door. Jada hesitated. She looked up at Terrence. Her face was still unreadable. "You gonna be there tomorrow?" she asked. His throat tightened. "If I'm allowed, I'll be right here, baby girl, I promise." She nodded once, climbed into the back seat, and buckled herself in without another word. Gloria shut the door gently and gave Terrence a long look. "You want to stay in her life," she said softly. "You'd better mean that promise." "I do," he said, "with everything I got left." She studied him for a moment, then reached into her purse and handed him a form. "Come to the office tomorrow. Fill this out. You'll need background checks, fingerprints, references, nothing quick. But if you're serious, this is the first step." Terrence took the form. It felt heavier than it looked, like paperwork made of concrete. "Thank you," he said. Gloria climbed into the driver's seat. The car pulled away slowly, taillights blinking red in the night mist. Terrence stood there long after they disappeared. Back in his truck, he sat in the driver's seat for nearly 15 minutes before starting the engine. His hands were cold. The dashboard lights glowed softly in front of him. He stared ahead, seeing only the curve of a small figure sitting silent in row 3. That night, he didn't sleep. The next morning, just after the sun broke over the edge of the apartment rooftops, Terrence stood outside the CPS office in Clarkston. He was wearing his pressed shirt, his cleanest jeans, and a pair of boots he hadn't worn since his daughter's wedding. Inside, he waited his turn at the front desk. When asked if he had an appointment, he said simply, "No, but I've got something more important than one." An hour later, he sat with a caseworker named Ms. Deandra Miles, who looked at him with weary kindness. "You're not a relative?" she asked. "No, ma'am." "But the girl Jada, she knows you?" "I drive her bus," he said. "But that girl looked at me last night like I was the only thing keeping her tied to this world, and I ain't about to let that thread snap." Deandra nodded slowly. "It'll take time, but if she wants contact and the court approves, we can start supervised visits." Terrence filled out every form, answered every question, left fingerprints, contact references, even a photo. When he left, his hands were ink-smudged, but his heart felt clearer than it had in years. That afternoon, he called Gloria King. She picked up on the third ring. "She asked about you," she said. "Didn't say much. Just wondered if you were real." Terrence smiled softly. "Tell her I'll be by tomorrow." 3:00, Gloria replied. "She'll be ready." That night, Terrence sat on his porch as the sky darkened. The cicadas buzzed in the trees. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's child laughed. He sat in his rocking chair, the same one he'd nearly thrown out last year when he thought his days of mattering were behind him. Now he rocked slow and steady, thinking of a little girl with tired eyes and a silent voice and the promise he had made to her. He was a man of few words, but when he made a promise, he kept it. The first visit was quiet. Jada Monroe sat at the far end of Gloria King's sunlit living room, her knees tucked beneath her, a notebook in her lap, and a dull pencil twirling between her fingers. Terrence Coleman sat across from her, a plate of oatmeal cookies resting untouched on the table beside him. He hadn't brought flowers or balloons or anything showy, just himself and a gentle presence. The same quiet calm he'd offered every day from behind the steering wheel of the school bus. Gloria had stepped out of the room to give them space, but the air between them felt thin and fragile, like it might shatter if either of them spoke too loud. So Terrence didn't rush. He just watched the light glint off the window and said, "I never liked oatmeal cookies much, but my wife used to love 'em. Said the raisins made 'em feel like fruit." Jada glanced up briefly, not smiling, but something flickered in her eyes. "I don't like raisins," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Me neither," he said with a small grin. That was how it began. No big moment, no hug, just the simple act of two people admitting they didn't like raisins and that being enough for a day. Over the following weeks, the visits continued. Twice a week, sometimes 3, always short at first, always supervised. Gloria was kind but cautious, a woman who had seen too many well-meaning men walk away when things got hard. But Terrence didn't walk away. He showed up, brought her coloring pencils once, another time a book about dogs. On the 4th visit, Jada told him she liked tigers. So the next time he brought a small stuffed one, soft and a little worn, from the thrift shop on Harrison Street. "His name is TJ," she announced. cradling it like a sacred object. Tiger Jr., Terrence laughed. Then I guess that makes me Tiger Sr. She nodded seriously. Yeah, you're big enough. The trust came slowly, not like a dam breaking, but like a leak, drop by drop, seeping through the cracks. At school, Jada started raising her hand more. Her teachers noticed. Her new friends noticed. Her foster mom noticed. She began sleeping through the night without waking from bad dreams. She told her therapist that the bus driver didn't just save her life, he gave her a new one. At a soccer game, Charles, now known on the bleachers as Mr. T, cheered so loudly when she blocked a goal that one of the parents jokingly asked if he was the team mascot. Jada beamed. That night, after the game, over microwave chicken nuggets and a paper plate picnic on Gloria's porch, she asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Coleman," she said, her voice shy, "do you think I could call you Grandpa?" Terrence stared at her, the nugget halfway to his mouth forgotten. His throat went tight. The word filled the air like a song he hadn't realized he'd been waiting his whole life to hear. "Sweetheart," he said slowly, blinking fast, "I'd be honored." From that day on she did. Not every time, not loudly, but in the quietest, truest moments, the moments that mattered, she would look up and say, "Grandpa, look at this drawing," or, "Grandpa, can you come to my school play?" And Terrence would say yes every single time. The paperwork took longer. Background checks, home assessments, interviews with social workers who examined every inch of his life under a microscope. They asked about his finances, his health, his past. He answered everything honestly. No, he didn't have family nearby. No, he'd never done this before. Yes, he was alone, but not anymore. He had Jada now, and she had him. Gloria advocated for him. Jada wrote a letter to the judge in crooked handwriting that said, "He makes me feel safe. He never yells, and he listens better than anyone I know." At the final hearing, the judge asked Jada directly if she wanted Terrence to be her legal guardian. She stood up straight in her flowered dress and said, "He's already my grandpa. You're just making it official." The courtroom chuckled gently, but the moment held weight. Terrence sat beside her, in his best suit, his tie too tight and his heart beating like a drum. When the gavel fell, it felt like a bell ringing in a quiet church. Afterward, outside on the courthouse steps, Terrence lifted her into his arms and spun her once around in a circle. She squealed and hugged him tight around the neck, and he whispered into her ear, "You gave me a reason to be here, baby girl." She whispered back, "You showed up. That's what heroes do." That night, they celebrated at a diner near the bus depot. Miss Lila, the waitress who had served Terrence eggs for over 10 years without asking for his order, brought out a slice of chocolate cake with 2 spoons and a cherry on top. "For the grandpa and his girl," she said with a wink. Jada giggled, digging into the cake with a grin as wide as Georgia. Terrence just sat back and watched her, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He thought about all the years he had spent in silence, all the birthdays missed, all the empty chairs at holidays, and how strange and beautiful it was that one little girl had filled all that space with the sound of laughter and hope. Later that evening, in the small lavender-painted bedroom of his modest house, Jada climbed into bed, her tiger tucked under one arm. Terrence stood in the doorway, the light casting a soft glow across the room. "Thanks for finding my lunchbox, Grandpa," she murmured sleepily. He swallowed the lump in his throat, stepped into the room, and kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you, baby girl, for letting me find you." She was asleep before he reached the hallway. He stood there for a long moment, looking back at the girl who had changed everything. Then he turned off the light, closed the door softly behind him, and whispered into the quiet, "We're just getting started." The following spring arrived gently, slipping into Georgia like a hymn at the end of a long sermon. The air smelled of honeysuckle and cut grass, and the sidewalks were littered with pink blossoms from the dogwood trees that lined the streets of Winford Heights. It had been nearly a year since Jada Monroe first boarded Terrence Coleman's school bus, her eyes hollow and her heart locked away in some hidden corner of her chest. Now, as she stood in front of the entire sixth-grade class on the stage of Brookdale Middle School, her hands didn't tremble. Her voice, though soft, carried through the auditorium like sunlight. "This is for people who think they're invisible," she said into the mic, her drawing held high, a colored pencil mural titled, "A Seat That Saved Me." Behind her was a simple picture, a yellow school bus, a small girl sitting in the third row, and a quiet man in a cap watching from the driver's mirror. "Sometimes you don't need someone to rescue you," she added. "You just need someone to see you." The room fell silent. Parents wiped at their eyes. A few students clapped awkwardly, then louder as others joined in. And near the back, sitting between Gloria King and Officer Raymond Delaney, Terrence bowed his head and felt something shift in his chest like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. When the ceremony ended, Jada ran down the auditorium steps and straight into his arms. He held her tightly, whispering something no one else heard, and she nodded against his shoulder. They walked out into the sunshine together, hand in hand, past teachers and classmates, past parents and PTA volunteers handing out lemonade and cookies, and toward a life that neither of them could have predicted, but both had chosen. Over the summer, Terrence started a small initiative through the school transportation office called Quiet Riders, a program that trained drivers to recognize behavioral signs in children, those who cried too quietly, who sat too still, who wore the same clothes too many days in a row. It wasn't revolutionary. It didn't make headlines, but it made a difference. In the fall, 3 drivers flagged cases that led to early interventions, and one of them wrote in a follow-up report, "If not for Mr. Coleman's training, I wouldn't have known what I was seeing." Jada helped design the logo, a simple outline of a school bus with a heart in the third row window, and she insisted it be printed in purple, her favorite color. They hung it proudly in Terrence's living room. That same room was where she learned how to play chess, how to make scrambled eggs without burning them, and how to patch a tire on a bicycle. They planted tomatoes in the backyard, painted the mailbox lavender, and on Sunday mornings Terrence played guitar on the porch while Jada sketched quietly beside him. In September, Jada asked if she could ride the bus again, not because she needed to, her new school was walking distance, but because she wanted to. "Just once," she said, "so I can sit in my seat again and remember." So they did. Terrence pulled Bus 17 out of the lot like he always had, though his official retirement paperwork was already submitted. He drove her through the familiar loop, no other students aboard, the air warm and golden as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. She sat in row 3, right side, and this time she looked out the window not in fear, but in peace. At one point, she stood and walked up to sit beside him. "Do you miss it?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometimes." "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Any of it?" He looked at her and smiled. "Not for a second." That winter, Jada's essay was published in a statewide education journal under the title, "The Driver Who Didn't Keep Driving." It ended with a single sentence. Heroes don't always have sirens or capes. Sometimes they wear a cap and drive a yellow bus. One rainy evening, not long after, Terrence stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching her asleep with TJ the tiger tucked under one arm and a book splayed open across her chest. He didn't say anything, just stood there with one hand on the doorframe, letting the moment settle around him like a warm coat. In the hallway, the floor creaked. Gloria stepped beside him with a mug of tea. "She's different now," she said softly, "more open, less afraid." "She's stronger," he corrected gently. "She was always strong. Now she knows it." They stood in silence, sipping tea and watching the soft rise and fall of Jada's breathing. Eventually, Gloria asked, "What made you stop the bus that day? You could have just gone home." He shook his head. "I was already home the moment I saw her." The next morning, Jada handed him a small envelope. It was her adoption recertification form, updated with her official name change. In careful handwriting, it read, Jada Monroe Coleman. Terrence read it twice, then pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked. "Does this mean I get to put your name on the mailbox now?" he asked. "Only if you let me paint it," she said with a grin. They painted it that afternoon lavender again, of course, with bright white lettering that read The Colemans. And on the side, just below the flag, Jada added a small drawing of a yellow bus with a heart in the third row. As the sun set, Terrence stood on the porch, guitar in hand, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. Jada sat on the steps, sketching the trees, her pencil moving with confidence. He strummed a soft tune, humming the words he used to sing to himself when the bus was empty and the world was quiet. And as the breeze carried their song through the air, he realized the most remarkable part of their story wasn't that he'd saved her. It was that she had saved him, too. Sometimes salvation doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, on wheels, in silence, in the seat where someone decides not to keep driving,